So you have a V-block tool, you've made some V-block units, you're happy with what you've made, but what else can you do with the tool? Some of the other units that you see laying on the table here are things that I make right along with my V-block tool. These are what I call Sidekick, and these are what we call high-low. We shot another little video on Sidekick, and the high-low blocks actually come from the Sidekick. So if you haven't seen the video, take a couple minutes to do that. What we're going to talk about here are these high-low units. And I call them high-low because each particular unit has one high point and one low point. We have right-hand high-low units and we have left-hand high-low units. So we're going to be using the V-block tool to be able to do that. We're going to make our Sidekick units. And if you haven't seen the video on how to make the Sidekicks, please check that out or pick up our technique sheet on how to make the Sidekicks. But before you trim those Sidekicks down to a precision size, what we're going to do is we're going to take them and go one step further. Each of the Sidekick units, the oversized Sidekick units that we've made, is going to get a folded corner onto the chunky side of the piece that you've created. To make that folded corner, you'll cut the squares the size that's listed on the technique sheet. They're going to be oversized as well so that everything has an opportunity to be made and trimmed down precisely. Now, when I go to mark the squares, I'm going to mark on the wrong side. I'm going to use my magic wand, but I'm not going to use my magic wand the way that I normally would. Normally, let me show normal. Normally when I use the magic wand, I would position the wand on so that the lasered line is on the corner of the squares. Now, that's not what you want to do. What we want to do to be able to create these folded corners is to slide the wand down just a little bit so that the edge of the wand is now at the corners, and then I'm going to mark not only that center diagonal from point to point, but I'm also going to mark a line that is ½ an inch away so that my squares are going to have two diagonals, one going point to point and one ½ an inch away. Each of these are going to be marked the same way. When you position them onto your oversized Sidekick units, take them and position them so that that bonus line, that little bonus line that's drawn ½ an inch away, is toward the corner. You want to make sure that you get them on there correctly. The line that we're going to use for our high-low is the diagonal. This is a bonus line that's going to end up with some bonus pieces. When you line those up, take a few minutes and make sure that they get pretty closely aligned to the edges of your background piece. If you get some staggering going on at the bottom, don't worry about lining the square up with the side triangle. Keep the edges of the square lined up with the edges of the background unit. So once you've marked, head to your sewing machine, do your sewing. The line that is important for your high-low is that diagonal guideline. Your bonus line is right here. You can see what's going to happen when I fold back that square corner into the corner. I'm going to have my high-low here, and I'm going to have my high-low here. Now, why did I take the time to stitch on that other line? Well, one of the things that you can do by stitching on that other line is take your high-low unit, trim it. You'll have your high-low unit. But you're also going to have stacks and stacks of these little pieced squares that you can then take with your tucker trimmer, clean them up to a precision size, turn them into some complementary little project to go along with it. Now, we've sewn them, we've cut them, we've pressed them, and now what we're going to do is trim them down to the precision size. I'm going to take these one at a time. Let's talk about the high-low left. I'm going to move those off for a minute. This is one that's already been trimmed. This is the one we're going to look at. When I take my V-block ruler and position it, the things that I'm looking at on the tool are this. I'm making a 4-inch unit. That's what I decided at the beginning of this. So I know that, and that's what I need to find along this long diagonal. I'm looking for 4. That's the size of my finished unit, 4-inch finished unit. That 4 is going to go right at the base, right at the seam intersection of the unit. This diagonal that comes up in this direction, since we're doing the left-hand piece, is the diagonal that we're going to look at. So I position this, make sure that the 4 gets snugged right down at the base. make sure that the diagonal that comes down into that 4 is along the long seam line, and I'm ready to trim. You'll notice in the past you had to pay attention to that other diagonal. That's not an issue here. It's just this and that diagonal line in that direction. Trim and trim. Nice clean corner. Rotate the unit around. When you do your second trim, I'm making a 4-inch finish, which means I need to trim it to 4.5 by 4.5. If I put my 2 cut sizes right along there, you're going to follow this line up. I can see that the X is right at the tip up there. I know I'm in the right position. And when I trim, this unit is perfectly sized, perfectly shaped, and every seam is exactly where it needs to be so that I get good end results when I build quilts with my high-low unit. Now that's how we do the left-hand side. I'm going to do a little cleanup here. Move that off to the side. Bring our right-hand unit in. It is similar as well. I'm making a 4-inch unit. Follow my diagonal down to find my 4-inch finished size. Look at the diagonal. Since this one has the one going into the upper right, look at the diagonal that goes into the upper right so that the 4 is at the seam intersection. The diagonal rests on the seam. I can trim up and I trim across, cleaning up that point and positioning the seam so that it's in exactly the right place to keep all my points. Rotate the unit around. When I reposition, trim it to 4.5 inches. Put my 4.5 here, put my 4.5 inch here. Make sure the little X is at that seam intersection, and I'm up and across again. Every single one is exactly perfect. So you can go on to use these units and make gorgeous quilts like the one you see behind me. All of these high-low units, these are V-block high-low left, are easy to piece together. They're easy to team up with simple squares. They're easy to team up with pinwheel units. And what's best yet of all is you get to keep all your points because every single one of your units has been trimmed to the exact right size and shape. The couple of little blocks that I've made using this is a nice example. My high-lows are teamed up with simply plain squares. They're 4.5-inch squares. And these are little pinwheel block made from 2.5-inch half-square triangles. This is another interesting block design, teamed up with 4 patches. It's a high-low here, teamed up with 4 patches, teamed up with a square-squared unit. And, you know, one of the nicest things about all my tools is that you're not locked into just that 4-inch size. You can take and do that same high-low unit with the technique sheet, with the sizes that are listed. With a little bit of practice, you can make them all the way from 1-inch finish sizes all the way up to 6-inch finish sizes. So head to your local quilt shop, pick up a V-block tool, pick up our technique sheet on the how-to. It'll give you all the hints and the tips that you need and all the sizes and the charts that you need. And if you can't find it at your local quilt shop, visit our website. While you're there, you may want to consider signing up for our newsletter so that you will be the first to know when we introduce new tools and new techniques.